Shout out to the sponsors of the podcast, MonarchToken.io, the complete crypto solution. Monarch Wallet is now available for Android, iOS, and desktop devices today. Do you want to learn how to mine crypto? Well, all you have to do is visit cryptomining.tools for profitable crypto mining information today. The Divi Project, that is diviproject.org, your one-click solution for staking and masternodes. Earn cryptocurrency using social media platforms like Somee.social, SOMEE.social, New Era Social Media. Get paid to write reviews, like reviews, comment on reviews. Visit bravocoin.com and get paid to review. Available for Android and iOS devices. bravocoin.com. CoinFlip, the world's best Bitcoin ATM. Better service, better fees. Better visit coinflip.tech today. Shout out to the sponsors of the podcast, Monarch.
Okay.
All right, there we go. We're live. Hey, how goes it? I'm Ken Bozak. We're going to be talking about crypto and crypto accessories. And today I'm with my bro Sam. We're going to be talking about Ripple and XRP will replace Bitcoin. It's a hard sentence to say out loud. Sam, how goes it, bro? Appreciate you scheduling a podcast.
I'm doing good. Happy to be here. I'm looking forward to a productive conversation.
Yeah, man. So I'm just curious, like, why do you see this? But I want to get into a little bit of you first. I know you have your own like YouTube channel and thing going on, and I wanted to give you a chance to maybe who is Sam? What are you doing in the space? Maybe how you got in this space.
Sure. So I have a telecom background for about 10 years, moved to New Hampshire to become part of the Free State Project. Was part of a radio program called Free Talk Live up there. It's a nationally syndicated pro-liberty radio station. And they were the ones who introduced me to Bitcoin. One of the early Bitcoin developers grabbed Mark Edge, one of the hosts, and kind of let him know back when it was sub $1
Oh wow.
that, hey, this thing's going to be huge. And I heard about it. I heard them talking about it, in those very, very early days. It was actually Roger Ver who sent me my first Bitcoin along with about 50 other people on Facebook.
That's awesome.
When they were, I don't know, $11, $12, something like that. And then I have my hesitation, concerns about it. I used it, and you can imagine the utility, what that was back in those days with Silk Road around and so forth. But I never moved a lot of money into it to hold it. I had gold and silver. It was kind of waiting for the economy to crash and that sort of thing. So I had always stayed away from Ripple and XRP because, it's the banker coin. And, don't want to be part of that system or help them or promote them or anything like that. And eventually, this was like 2.5 years ago, some of the other Free State Project people and liberty activists and anarchists brought me into this group on Facebook, Lambos, Hookers, and Blow version 2. The first one, I think, got shut down. Nobody talks about it. But their goal, which they didn't tell me, was to kind of get me to understand what they saw, which, I kind of watched the group for a few months and learned, okay, they really like XRP because of its utility and the banks are going to use it. And it's going to sort of evolve the global financial system. And they really like Monero because it's the one true privacy coin that's like built from the ground up with privacy in mind. And then once I decided, okay, I'm going to do this, I started learning about Ripple and XRP and Xcurrent, XVIA, XRapid, which all the stuff that Ripple is using XRP to kind of build their own proprietary products around. And that's when I decided, okay, this is gonna go. And that's when I started investing. And then I ended up, of course, in my activism days, I had a YouTube channel, and they figured I would eventually start making YouTube videos, which I did. And I have a channel called To the Lifeboats on YouTube, and I talk about mostly XRP, but really anything crypto related is on the table.
So you've been involved for a little while then, and I maybe could have even potentially speculated on agreeing with you on these statements before things like J.P. Morgan got involved, and I see XRapid Ripple competing more so with Swift protocol than with Bitcoin. When you're saying banker coin, it's more so banker protocol at that level. And Swift is a worldwide used protocol for financial institutions, no matter what government you're in. Iran to Russia to China, they all use Swift.
Yes, they
That
do.
is an American government owned technology. That's an American language.
Not exactly. It's owned by the banks. It's kind of like a member-owned organization. However, the U.S. government has gone so far as threatening to ban the SWIFT board members from travel to the U.S. and like
Mm-hmm.
freeze their assets and so forth if they didn't implement blockades against Iran and others. So it's under the thumb of the U.S. government, unfortunately, like most of these big organizations out there. And that's a good point. I think there's a lot of people that fail to distinguish between XRP, the XRP ledger. With Bitcoin, Satoshi didn't have the foresight to distinguish between Bitcoin the token and Bitcoin the payment network.
Yeah, big B, little b.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. So with Ripple, that's XRP and XRPL, or the XRP ledger. So XRP and XRPL has all the same features, trustless, immutable, decentralized, permissionless, and so forth. All the stuff that you can do on Bitcoin, you can do on the XRP ledger. What Ripple has done is they've come in and built something on top of that that utilizes the XRP ledger, and they call that RippleNet. RippleNet is going to be, I think, the replacement for Swift. So RippleNet is
But again,
proprietary.
you just mentioned earlier why Swift is so heavily enforced and how it's so heavily enforced around the world that XRP or Ripple, they're competing with the US government who is enforcing the Swift protocol being utilized as a financial protocol. Now you have JP Morgan coming up with their own bank version of crypto or Ripple, being the JP Morgan coin, right?
Yep.
So, what incentive does a government or any institution around the world have as to go against the United States enforcement of SWIFT protocol, which would most likely just be switched with JP Morgan coin protocol? Why would, I'm just saying, like, how do you see Ripple competing with the US government when it comes to SWIFT protocol? I mean, like, Ripple is not competing with Bitcoin. They're competing with the banking institution, and this is backed by nukes, not just by In God We Trust.
Okay, so JP Morgan is a commercial bank. I think you're kind of conflating the US government and Swift and JP Morgan. Swift is owned by the banks, the member banks. Is it influenced and are they threatened by the US government? Yes. I mean, who isn't? Because they're the big bully on the block and
Right.
the big empire of the globe at this
Yeah,
time.
we've
And
seen what happened with Saddam, Gaddafi, Osama bin
yeah,
Laden, anybody who went against the
the central
dollar.
banks or wanted to implement a gold backed currency. Oh, we got to get rid of them. Um, Now, with JP Morgan coin, what you have is an asset that is centralized. It is trusted because you have to trust JP Morgan. It's got counterparty risk. Generally, those are stable coins. So you have the underlying risk of you have the risk of the underlying asset, which is the US dollar, and then you have the counterparty risk on top of that, which is that JP Morgan has created a sound system that's not going to be hacked or that they're not going to manipulate or inflate artificially or something along those lines.
Well, this also inspired the Federal Reserve to announce their Fed Now by the year 2020, which is just one step, from banks to the Federal Reserve to the SWIFT protocol layer of like SWIFT coin coming out. You know what I mean?
Sure, but see the problem with Swift, they've had the chance to innovate. What Ripple did in the early days is they went to the banks and said, "Hey, you guys buy XRP and use this to send money everywhere in the world." And they're like, no way, we're not touching that. That's the stuff of drug dealers and money launderers and child traffickers. Get out of here. And then they went back and said, well, what if we, have the money, have
That wasn't
market
really what was
makers.
keeping bankers away from XRP, man. It was the fact that they can't just print XRP at their will like they can with debt, US dollar. They can't fractionally reserve XRP. They can't. It wasn't that the fiat that they use is used for drug money, and they know that. It's not that that's what kept them away from using it. It's just they don't have the same control economically as they do over the US dollar. That's
But,
why.
but Ken, I think what you're missing is you're talking about other governments dealing with other governments. They all know that they're scoundrels and criminal organizations trying to one up the next guy. So none of them are going to trust each other. They want to trust each other as little as possible. And the best way to do that is to get away from fiats, which can all be manipulated. I mean, look at what China's done with the yuan over the last decade. I mean, the largest inflation in the history, in recorded history that we know of, even more than the U.S. government's inflation. So with XRP, you have this sound money, this digital asset that cannot be just inflated at will, that they're going to use as a bridge to bridge these fiat currencies and let the market actually control the exchange rate. You don't have to trust anybody in that environment. Whereas with JP Morgan coin or with any kind of stable coin or central bank coin, there you do have to have that trust.
I feel like Libra coin has a better chance of accomplishing every goal that XRP has ever set in probably a tenth of the timeline it would take Ripple to accomplish this through the partnerships Facebook already has. Facebook already has over what 5 fucking billion people using their platform. I mean,
No,
like,
they have 5 billion or 6 billion users, whatever it is. How many people are actually logging into that platform? I think it's in decline and it's in trouble. And again, it's a stable coin. We've had a stable coin for the last 20 years. No, what was it? Like 40 years. It's called the SDR. It's what the IMF created. It's a basket of fiat currencies. And their goal was to do exactly what Libra was trying to do. They wanted this trade instrument that could be passed around by different countries and used to exchange commodities to get away from the dollar as the global reserve currency. If you've watched what Putin has had to say about the dollar, he's like, look, I like our allies, the U.S. government and so forth, but they're really shooting themselves in the foot. And he talks about the unfunded liabilities. He talks about the out of control spending that is not being reined in. And look at Trump's latest budget. It's $1 trillion deficit. That is insanely unsustainable. So and that's really, if you look at BRICS, that's what that is all about. They're trying to get away from the dollar. Everybody wants to get away from the dollar because it's exporting inflation to these other countries and it's causing problems here economically as well. So there needs to be a transition to something new. And I think that something new is going to be XRP as a bridge asset, not a basket of fiat currencies. Because with the SDR, nobody used it. The rich countries stash it away in a bank account, and the poor countries sell it for fiat and then use that and spend it on their domestic programs.
so the topic we have here is sort of like how XRP could replace Bitcoin, right? And this is more of like a banker coin. I don't see the mainstream individuals opting in to using XRP as likely as they would be to maybe opt into something like Bitcoin. And I'm, I mean, just the having 20 XRP locked in a wallet mandatory just to do anything, it's too much like one of those bank accounts, man. It feels wrong to be able to see that you have money that you're not allowed to have access to.
Do you know that they're already opting in today?
Who?
Uh, Average Joes that are using XRP and they have no idea that they're using it.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I've never seen a sign that says, XRP accepted here. I've seen plenty that say Bitcoin accept it.
Right. But how many people are using Bitcoin without knowing it because it's been integrated into the back end process of a money transmitter?
Well, they're not using XRP. They're
Yeah,
using
they
Ripple.
are. No, they're using XRP. So let's talk MoneyGram. So yesterday, they sent $11 million worth of Bitcoin from their U.S. exchange to Bitso, the largest exchange in Mexico. And that is accounting for about 7.5% of all remittances going U.S. to Mexico, one of the largest corridors in the world. It's between 30 and $36 billion a year. Um, those are people who are, like workers, Mexican workers in the United States, sending money back home to their families through MoneyGram. They're going to a retail location like Walmart or the grocery store, the liquor store that has a agent location. They're giving them fiat, and on the other side, within 60 seconds, Mexican pesos are coming out to their family members, and they're using they're using, yes, RippleNet to facilitate that. But at its core, they're taking fiat and buying XRP on the US exchange, and then they're sending that to the Mexican exchange Bitso, where it's being sold for Mexican pesos, and then that's being delivered to
But
the
how's that doing anything different than Bitcoin, though? I mean, you
well,
could fill in the blank of any coin that does this. I mean, but you can send Bitcoin through Coinstar machines. I could drop a couple pennies into a Coinstar machine and send somebody else the money out of that machine around the world.
great. How often is that happening? Because yesterday it was $11 million for Bitcoin or
Well,
for
right.
XRP.
Well, Bitcoin's the number one coin on Coin Market Cap, so more people are
Well, that's
using
price.
BTC than
No,
XRP.
okay, but that's not utility. People are trading it and day trading it, and there's a lot of speculation.
Well,
There's a
that's
difference.
that Bitcoin has a lot of use cases, and speculation is one of its main use cases. Just because people aren't,
That's not a use
but it
case.
is a use case. I mean, that's what you came from gold and silver, bro. Like that's one of gold's biggest use cases is speculation
Gold's use
on top of
case
technology, and then like jewelry.
Gold's use case is preserving wealth, preserving value.
That's
So as
Bitcoin.
the dollar's inflating, well, okay. So a store of value, is it a very good one? Not for the people who bought in at 18,000. It's pretty terrible for them if they had any kind of short term, like 2 years, anytime over the last 2 years, they needed to cash out. Well, it was a terrible store of value, especially compared to gold.
Well, where XRP is being used, like you were mentioned, during all time highs, having 20 XRP locked in your wallet or costing, it would basically cost an end user 20 XRP to open a Ripple account to have a wallet to send and receive. At the all time high, they were like $2 and like 70 something cents in XRP.
Okay,
That's a
so
very expensive wallet to open if you're trying to just use a crypto. It doesn't cost me anything to open a Bitcoin wallet. I could see that being way more user friendly for mass adoption than an XRP wallet in a scenario where the volatility of just having the permission to use that blockchain costs so much.
Okay, so two things there. One, not every user needs a actual wallet on the blockchain. So with MoneyGram, with all of the financial institutions, the payment processors, and so forth, they have a wallet. They've put that 20 XRP in, and their users don't even know most of the time that they're using XRP. Two, Ripple's do. There's two things there that
So if
that
it wasn't for MoneyGram, nobody would use XRP because only reason people you're said the saying the only people using XRP are the people that are using MoneyGram. MoneyGram is using XRP.
well, there's more than a dozen companies that are
Right, but they're
using
not
XRP just
people
like
on the
MoneyGram.
front end that are going out of their way to utilize it or use it, right? So like if Bitcoin is to disrupt MoneyGram, people stop using MoneyGram. Who's using XRP if MoneyGram was doing the work for them?
Well, we're 10 years in and Bitcoin was going to replace the banks. How's that going? Bitcoin,
Uh,
see, this is the fantasy of Bitcoin maximalists. They think that Bitcoin is just going to jump up all on its own and replace the existing fiat system. And the approach that Ripple's taking is to bridge and connect with the existing system and allow interoperability. And we're really only talking about one use case, but we can go there. But I want to back up and finish the 20
mhm.
XRP reserve requirement. So one, that's a flexible amount. It can go up or down, and that is determined by the validators who are running the network. They can set a flag that will trigger a vote to, raise it or lower it. So if the price goes way up, then they can set it at 5 or 2 or 1, whatever that needs to be, whatever they think is best for the network. It's a measure to prevent spam and, flooding the network with nonsense transactions, with wash trading, basically.
But the
And then
potential
there's
for
also,
censorship.
um,
Um,
I don't know that I would call that censorship.
That's censorship. I mean, you have the potential to disenfranchise the poor. Those who only have very small accounts could see that they no longer can afford to do any transactions because of the parabolic volatility of the network and that extra. I mean, you're right. It is possible for them to set the limit to 1 XRP instead of 20, but it's also possible for it to go to 100.
Yeah, but nobody's going to vote for, setting it to $3,000 or something like that. It doesn't make any sense. Now, the other thing that's happened is there is a deletable accounts feature right now. Currently, that 20 XRP is locked and you cannot recover it. You can't delete an account or a private public key pair on the XRP ledger. But what they've done is written code to allow a deletable accounts feature where you can recover 75% of that fee. So
Uh-huh.
you delete the account and you get, currently with it being set at 20, you get 15 back. That amendment has been proposed. It's waiting to get, it has to get 80% of the validators to set a flag that says they support it. That has to hold for 2 weeks, and then it will be adopted, and the network will uh, enable that feature, basically. So there's two things that I think address that concern. Look, there are poor people in Africa and elsewhere that can't, are never going to own a Bitcoin wallet either, because they don't have a cell phone or don't have access to electricity, but they could still use a service provider that can do a hosted wallet. Now, is that as good as or as secure as having your own keys? No, but it's a valid option. Is there some level of censorship there? Yeah, I guess so. That's one way to look at it. I'll give you that point.
So, I mean, I know MoneyGram's using XRP. Western Union, I believe, even announced they're dabbling with BTC for remittance. So it's going to be interesting to see where they actually like compare the apples to the oranges as far as like looking at the use case from their perspective.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're going to have reports come out at the end of this year with like some pretty interesting statistics.
and I can tell you what they're going to find. It's going to be too slow. The fees are not going to be uh, predictable, and they're going to be too high for them to try and use it in a business setting. With businesses, it's all about certainty and cash flow. They need to know, how much is it going to cost me to use this network, this feature, and how long is it going to take? And with Bitcoin,
Yep.
when you have a bull run happening, I sent a transaction, or someone actually sent me a transaction, and it took 2 weeks because the fee was set very low during that run to 19,000 before the Bitcoin landed in my wallet,
Yeah.
because the mempool was so full. And you have one of the payment processors just announced it's utterly useless for payments because of that changeable fee feature, where you can go in and manipulate the fee and empty out the wallet that a payment processor has already authorized. That Bitso itself, who is the largest, Mexican exchange, the largest exchange handling X or ODL with on-demand liquidity, what used to be X current, handling those transactions with Ripple. They created a Bitcoin uh, remittance app, basically, that people could use directly with Bitcoin to send money to their friends and family in Mexico, and it never got any traction.
Yeah, well, I mean, Coinbase does tens of thousands of transactions using, and this was mentioned in the chat, batch transactions, which businesses are more commonly going to use than individual transactions. They're not going to pay an individual transaction fee for every transaction going through Western Union for BTC. They'll probably be doing bigger batched transactions, probably pooling into another pool for that as well.
Okay, and then they're having to keep bigger pools of money set aside, so there's risk and cost
Well, they do that with
associated with
cash
that.
already anyway. I mean, but if they're sending
Sure.
20 grand across, they have to have 20 grand and a dollar where from they're sending it from.
But with XRP, they can send money. It can be fiat to fiat within 60 seconds, and the cost is a few cents,
Yeah, but
literally.
wouldn't the point to be not to just fiat to fiat? Wouldn't you want to have a
Because
circular economy?
because with Bitcoin, there was a Pomp interview where he talked to a VC guy who has invested in Ripple and a bunch of other companies out there. And this person pointed out to Pomp that today Bitso is handling, I think it was 3% at the time of remittances of the 30 to 36 billion-dollar annual remittance market. Of course, now that's 7.5%. This is in the last week. It's more than doubled. Um, and Pomp was like, well, that's pretty amazing because this is all going over crypto rails. So the consumers have to understand the technology, they have to adopt it, and so on and so forth. From his perspective, and from a lot of the Bitcoin maximalist perspective, what they expect is for consumers to go out and get educated all about Bitcoin and learn about Bitcoin and learn how to secure their keys and load a wallet on their phone and this and that. With Ripple, with XRP, with RippleNet, there's none of that. It exists, it integrates into the existing financial system, makes things faster, cheaper, and reduces errors. So
And I think that's where, and that's not, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist by any means. I haven't
okay,
even used BTC in like 8 months. I've been using Bitcoin Cash way more
okay,
frequently
I,
because
I
I
like
do have
Roger.
those issues. I've had issues with, pending confirmations, the
Hmm.
transaction fees, and everything I do, I spend crypto on it. So at the end of the month, the amount of money I'm spending in transaction fees for like, buying something to eat or getting a ride or X, Y, and Z, it starts to add up. So I
It
started
does.
using Bitcoin Cash because anywhere BTC is accepted, BCH is accepted. I haven't seen a difference in my lifestyle. But nobody is talking about an XRP ETF. We have Bitcoin ETFs constantly being talked about and being pushed for. When it comes to like something like XRP, the token, trying to get it to a new all-time high, past that glass ceiling of like 270 or something, with the supply rate and issuance. How feasible is that with ever? Like, you know what I mean? Without the clear market manipulation that was taking place all across crypto back in like 2017 through 18.
And it's still happening.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you, Tether.
so, a couple things. Ripple just put out an article on their insights page where I think it was Brianne Madigan, who is I think she's the head of global markets for Ripple. She's talking about exactly that. One of the things that they need for the ecosystem to develop are the tools, the ability to, use some of these option trading to, um, what's the best word, to protect themselves from risk. And some of those things are starting to come online now. So there's a maturization, I guess, of the marketplace that has to take place and that is taking place. So, that's coming. Let me think. What else were you asking about there? I lost my train of thought.
No, no problem. I was trying to keep up with the chat, and well, I was already ready for the next question, unfortunately.
Okay, no, we'll move
But
on.
yeah, they were saying first, could you prove XRP is centralized? And in a way, my argument for that is the amount of XRP Ripple holds is like 80% or some shit.
Hmm.
It's a
No,
lot.
no, it's 60 something,
It,
65,
it
60,
dwindled away, so it's
maybe,
60 something
or
percent.
50. It might even be, I think it's 57% right now.
So how is that not by definition centralization?
Okay, so there's aspects to centralization. I'll use a Bitcoin example here. You have the nodes, which are that keep the full history, 10,000 of those around the world. That's very decentralized. It gets an A plus there. You have miners, which are centralized around places with cheap electricity, and that's China and a few handful of other places around the world, that gets an F minus, in my book, because it's also susceptible to a 51% attack. With XRP, you have the XRP ledger, and all of the properties around the XRP ledger are decentralized, trustless. There is no single entity that can dictate transactions, which ones are allowed and which ones are not. There's nobody that can freeze the XRP. There's really no difference between Bitcoin and XRP when it comes to kind of the features of the blockchain. And we're talking trustless, decentralized, immutable,
Do you think
on and
Ripple
on.
Labs though could be a bigger detriment than a benefit to XRP? The
Uh,
centralization of the corporation, the people behind it. I mean, at any point in time, they could have the Mad King disease and go fucking ape shit and dump like Elon Musk smoking a joint on Joe Rogan. That affected Tesla stock, SpaceX, X, Y, and Z. He ended up getting sued for that. So I mean, like the centralization of Ripple Labs, it could affect XRP, by
so
centralizing it in the corporate sense.
so that is, Ripple owning 57 billion or 56 billion XRP, whatever it is, that's not centralization. That's asset ownership. Are they the largest shareholder or owner of XRP? Absolutely, they are. That was a concern that I think was raised years ago. So that's where they came up with the escrow, and that 50 billion of their XRP is locked in a rolling window.
And that's one of
Um,
their sales pitches is that they are centralized in that sense that they could at least potentially secure the network from 51% attacks by having over
no,
51%.
but that's no. XRP uses consensus, not proof of work. So it is immune from a 51% attack. If you wanted to attack do a double spend or something like that on the XRP ledger, you would have to control 80% of the validators.
I was speaking more on like dumping the market,
Okay, so
straight dumping on the market where it wouldn't cost them anything to make a lot of money just selling a little bit of that reserve.
and how much do they lose by crashing the price of XRP? I mean, they're a
But the
company.
potential is there. That's
No,
where the
it's not. The potential is for Ripple to continue what they're doing, working with the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, the central banks around the world, the commercial banks around the world, the money transmitters, the payment processors, the credit
I
unions.
think all the banks are just going to say thank you for the idea. We really appreciate all your support, and we're going to do this on our own. JP Morgan kind of got the ball rolling. Other banks are kind of come together, and they're going to do the same thing they did with the Swift protocol and come up with their own version that they have more of ownership than incorporating, a corporate coin like Ripple.
That doesn't solve the problem. At the end of the day, that doesn't solve the problem. The problem is you have the dollar as the global reserve asset, and it's creating all these problems around the world. And all of these countries want to get out from under it. That Russia has been the most vocal about it. They're pointing out the unfunded liabilities. They're pointing out the out
They're
of control
not. They're no,
spending.
Rush.
So
Putin's
creating the
not going to use XRP and make all these fucking CEOs and CFOs and CMOs of Ripple Labs rich and wealthy. Putin's not going to do that. The same way he doesn't want to
so
work with
you're
Swift. He doesn't
so
want to work
you're
with Ripple.
So when these banks switch to Ripple and MoneyGram and others, they're saving between 60 and 90%. So you think that Russian banks, which by the way, there's like a half dozen Russian banks that are RippleNet customers, you think they're going to just be left behind and stay at the current fee structure while everybody else is saving uh, 60 to 90%? And they're
It
gonna be
depends on what
bleeding.
the governments are saying.
No, they're gonna be bleeding customers, Ken. They're gonna be hemorrhaging massive market share because they're not competitive in the new landscape. They don't have any choice but to adapt or die. And if you think these wealthy people who have billions of dollars in the bank can't move that somewhere offshore where, to a bank that's going to save them 90% and be more competitive and have all these options versus somebody that's going to stick with the old guard. That's crazy.
This is the same fever dream Bitcoin maximalists have, and I don't agree with Bitcoin mainstream adoption either. It's never going to happen. I think Libra or some stable coin has a way better chance of seeing quote unquote mainstream adoption than anything like BTC or XRP ever will, because governments won't enforce it. For anything to reach mass adoption, governments like the United States government has to enforce it the same way that they enforce the US dollar and SWIFT protocols on other countries. So until you have a nuke pointed at you saying you have to use BTC, or a nuke saying you have to use XRP, it'll never see mass adoption. There'll always be somebody that comes in
Nobody's
and takes it, replicates it, does it for themselves.
nobody's forcing the banks to use Swift. They use Swift because it was the only system that solved the problem of moving money around the world, other than short of putting gold bars on a plane and flying them across the ocean. And there's so much more risk with that.
It's not a currency, it's a utility coin. Okay, I can see that. I'm just going through the chat to see if anybody
Okay.
had any questions outside of yelling at me. Coronavirus is a bigger threat to Bitcoin than Ripple is to XRP. That's funny. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I just don't see it competing with Bitcoin in the same sense. It's just apples to oranges. If anything, Ripple being the banker coin and banking being the problem, the institution of finance in that sense is the scam. Like it's just making a shitty situation better with better tech. It's still, you know what I mean? It's not. I don't see it getting any better. I
No.
just see it staying worse with better tech.
uh for the people who are giving up 7% of their income to send it back home, and that fee goes to less than 1%, that's better. That's a huge
Yeah, you could
improvement.
use
I mean,
Bitcoin Cash and pay zero fees now. They're like literally zero fees right now because they're like paying people to use BCH.
well, you know what, they're not doing that today. They're not doing that. And while I like Roger and I like Bitcoin Cash, um, it's a marginal improvement over Bitcoin, and it's not going to scale. Bitcoin is stuck at 7 transactions per second. Uh, Litecoin does 4x of that.
Lightning Network and things to that
Yeah,
effect.
Lightning Network's a joke in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I can't. I didn't even want to do it because I'm like, I don't even like fucking defending Lightning Network. I'm one of those guys that's like, Lightning isn't even Bitcoin. It's a redeemable coin for Bitcoin. It's like a
Yeah,
Bitcoin
it,
coupon.
it's tier two, and it gets away from the fundamentals. And see, this is another thing that Ripple does, or that not Ripple, sorry, that XRP and the XRP ledger does, that sets it apart from everybody else out there. Everyone else is using proof of work. They're susceptible to 51% attack, and they have scaling problems. XRP uses consensus. It's already base chain 1,500 transactions per second. You can set up as many payment channels as you want, which is kind of the equivalent to Lightning Network. And you can go 50,000 TPS plus on those. So it's already solved the scaling issues. And that's how it came about. You had Jed McCaleb and Chris Larson and David Schwartz, who were working on Bitcoin in the early days back in 2012. And they foresaw, you know what, this thing has has problems with its architecture and it's not going to scale. And turns out several years later they were proven correct in the 2017 bull run. So they solved that problem before most people even knew that it was a problem. And today they're trying to, patch all these things together. And, Bitcoin Cash, they did away with the cap on the block size, and they've patched it in one way. And the Bitcoin core team is trying to pack more transactions in a block. And everybody's trying these patchwork of solutions, but none of them, you know if we're talking mainstream adoption, we're talking billions of people using a crypto, a blockchain like Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. would 700 transactions per second be enough? Even with Lightning Network, you still have to go back and hit the public chain eventually. What does that base chain number need to be? And I don't even think 700 would be enough. I doubt they're even going to get to 70 with their patches and things that they're doing. So, that's another, I guess, thing that I look at that says, no, these aren't long-term solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, man, and I mean, banks are getting into BTC as well. It's a supply and demand issue too when it comes to BTC versus something like XRP, where
Yeah.
banks only need to get a little bit into BTC for it to see a new all-time high, as opposed to with the supply and the way XRP is even utilized, it could be a lot. You're going to need a lot more of their efforts to see any results in market value. So I'm just saying, like,
It's a factor of 41.
so I was going to say, like, where does the Ripple net come into play here as far as like the supply and market value for a token like XRP?
Um, okay, so we've only talked about RippleNet and what they're doing with the banks, but you have this whole other entirely another ecosystem with the ILP, Interledger Protocol, and the Internet of Value, and micropayments and all the stuff there. Ripple has invested over $500 million in various ecosystems. From They gave $100 million to Grant for the Web, which is working to revolutionize or evolve the payment models for the web for content creators like you and I. They gave $100 million to Forte to integrate XRP into, native XRP into their gaming platforms. And the list goes on and on. Browsers, video, streaming websites, blog, just that's a whole nother discussion that could be 2 hours. So there's also that whole area of utility. Um, but as far as where the banks come in with XRapid, or sorry, with on-demand liquidity, you have to have somebody out there holding XRP in order for and offering it for sale to the marketplace in order for the banks to be able to use it. Okay. And so right now there's 42 billion, 50 billion, somewhere around there, that's out there in the ecosystem that's loose. Um, and then there's only a certain amount of that that's actually liquid and available for sale or on the market, essentially. That's probably 12 to 14 billion, somewhere around there. Well, these banks are wanting to, there was a customer at Swell, which is Ripple's user event, that said they could send over $1 billion a day down a single rail. That's a lot of XRP. And that's just one rail. And they're going to have to buy from a market maker in their local market, in their local currency. And you've got 180 of those around the world. So there's a lot of people that are going to have to sit there and hold XRP, waiting for the banks to come in and buy it so that they can send it somewhere else and make a spread. So there's a tremendous amount of liquidity that's going to need to be sloshing around to handle $4 trillion worth of payments a day, which is what the Swift network is currently running.
All right, all right. So do you like? I'm just curious. Like, where do you see, the, I guess, like like, do you admit to any hurdles? Do you see any, are you too far down the XRP rabbit hole to see where this could potentially go wrong, or is it just inevitable? Like, or like how Bitcoin maximalists see the very similar roadmap for XRP that you see. Do you see where this could just not work out? Do you see a potential for JP Morgan coin, or for the Fed
Oh,
now, or for something else? Obviously, yes, things are using XRP from MoneyGram to XYZ, like you mentioned during the podcast, but just because you're using XRP today doesn't guarantee that that's what they'll be using tomorrow.
yeah.
If BTC does have an updated implementation, if Lightning does pick up, where that potential for saving and liquidity, blah blah blah, outweigh XRP's, there is potential for that, right?
Yes. So I'm not here to carry water for Ripple or anybody else, and I have my criticisms. I was not happy about the IPO announcement. I do, however, feel like they are really far down the road at this point. To where is there something that's going to come along and derail them? I'd say it's very, very unlikely. And are there are there going to be other solutions in the marketplace? Absolutely. Are there going to be other cryptos with other use cases solving other real world problems? Yeah, I think there's probably a half dozen to a dozen of the current, what is it, 5,000 plus shit coins out there that are actually going to make it and have real world utility. So I'm not a XRP maximalist by any measure. Um, and when it comes to some of these stable coins or CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, where they might, in some of the larger corridors, exchange CBDC for CBDC, absolutely. Is that going to take some market share from Ripple and on demand liquidity? Very possibly. However, at the end of the day, it's still a walled garden. Even with Facebook coin, it's still a walled garden. It may be a bigger one if they are ever able to pull that off, and I don't know that they are at this point. You know, it just it they went about it in the wrong way, and the thing seems to be falling apart at this point. So
People in the chat saying Ripple's crossed the chasm's gone too far. Nothing has gone too far to
they
fail,
have
bro. I mean, if ISIS wanted to adopt XRP for terrorist coin, that's probably all it would take at this point. We are still
no
very early. Everybody is still very early that false flags can be flung very high in this space, and it can be used to against you to kill you. You know, if anybody, it depends if the powers that be, Illuminati tinfoil hat on my head, wanted to come in and demonize the technology, it wouldn't cost much to do it today.
except that they realize this system is inevitable, and they Bitcoin, I think it I look at it as the Napster of the digital money evolution, right? It sparked it. It got us realizing that and recognizing that, oh man, we can have this trustless system. We can have money without a central party that we can exchange person to person, and we can do it anywhere in the world without having to meet face to face. Those were huge innovations, right? But the powers that be couldn't control it. They don't have any kind of say over it. And I think Ripple is a good compromise. It's you have XRP, the XRP ledger, which is trustless, decentralized, so forth. There's no central authority over that aspect of it. But on top of that is RippleNet, which is run by a company. It's centralized, it's proprietary, on and on. And that's where they can exert some influence and control. And look at their list of customers, look at who they're talking to. Brad went to the Swiss bank meeting and presented to the head of the Bank of International Settlements. Christine Lagarde was there when she was running the IMF. Of course, now she's in charge of the ECB. She's had very positive things to say about Ripple, not so positive about Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's the Bank of England is a RippleNet paying RippleNet customer. The Fed now, the Faster Payments Task Force, Ripple was on that. They responded to it. They were really the only company that had a solid solution. The number two guy under Muchin from the Treasury ended up going to work for Ripple, and he's heading up their regulatory department now.
Interesting.
The connections are there, and they are the chosen one, if you want to think of it that way, by the powers that be, because they realize if they do nothing and they continue down the same course, they're going to lose all control. So they're kind of between a rock and a hard place where either we let the marketplace decide and we might end up with something that we really hate, or we give up a little power and go with Ripple where we can still kind of have some influence and control over this.
I guess so, man. I don't even consider XRP a cryptocurrency, bro. It's more like a digital currency at best. I mean,
Why not?
if
What makes it not a cryptocurrency?
dude, if I can't mine it, I don't want it. You know, if I can't participate in the creation of its generation, is it real at that point? I mean, that's like the reason the fiat sucks is you can just, hey, we need more of it. All right, let's just get more of it, and
Mm.
waiting for the day XRP, Ripple decides they need a little bit more XRP, and there you go. Just, hey, you
They
got
can't. They
more
can't
of
do
it.
that. There's no mechanism to create more XRP. And they would have to get
No, the, well, the
80%.
50, the 60 to 50 to 60% that they have. I mean, that's what I mean. They would just release it. It's more like they have a batch that they can just they have paper that they have saved that they can print on.
Okay, so let's talk about the difference between Ripple's model with XRP and what they're doing with that versus proof of work. Okay,
Okay.
and mining. So with mining, you have miners out there who are buying $2,000 mining rigs. They're consuming massive amounts. I mean, we're talking what is it, 7 terawatts at this point? Like a more energy than Tokyo, consuming massive amounts of electricity. Well, they have to pay that electric bill every single month. So most of the Bitcoin that's coming out, and that's $17 million a day right now. It's probably higher with the recent run up. That is a massive sum of money, and most of that is getting sold, and that's new money that's coming into the network because people are having to buy that Bitcoin that the miners are selling because they need to pay electric bills or they're running at a loss.
Right. Somebody
Okay.
mentioned in the chat earlier when you mentioned the centralization of China mining, and I didn't mention it at the time, but I'll take this segue now to say China doesn't hold Bitcoin. They sell it to white guys in suits to pay the electric bills in China. They don't hodl it. It's an export to them, just for the record.
Okay. I would say it's an excellent money laundering vehicle
Yes.
because their miners are created in China. Their electric companies are run on coal that's mined in China. They have this funny money called the yuan that they can pay all the employees in. They can pay the power bills in. They can pay, all the expenses of Bitcoin mining can be paid in the yuan. And what they get in return is Bitcoin, this asset that's liquid all around the world. It's a perfect money laundering vehicle for the CCP. Um, However, with that model, what you have, yes, you can participate, but we're coming up on the great centralization. The Bitcoin maximalists like to refer to it as the halvening, but really it's the great centralization because that's going to be the result. The rewards are going to cut in half, and it's going to exclude a lot of people on push them outside of the circle of profitability, and that's a race to the bottom that's just going to continue and continue as time goes on. More and more people will get pushed out. Mining will further and further centralize in places with cheap power. That's
Yeah, the
there's no
argument to
denying it.
that would be Moore's law, where mining equipment would be produced at such a rate that it would be, balance out in cost of, the because there's going to be incentive to make the shovels if people keep digging for gold. So like, yeah, these miners are expensive now, but eventually we'll see, and even US miners have to buy them from China. We don't even manufacture them here yet. So
Yep.
if we could inspire that to happen, we could start to see the costs come down significantly
Yeah,
as
and free energy is going to make Bitcoin cheap, and yeah, I've heard it all.
yeah, I know.
And
I'm
even
not by
if
any means again, guys, like a Bitcoin maximalist. I
yeah,
really am not. I mean, I don't know if you even know
but
this, but
it's
like
true
I
for
did pretty well off of XRP early on in crypto. I got in it. This is like public shit I've done in like YouTube
yep.
videos, but like I bought XRP at 4 cents, and I think it was 30,000 XRP at 4 cents, and I sold it at
That's a
$2.71.
killing. Nice.
I did
Yeah.
it in a bubble bath. I was in a bubble bath on a Facebook live stream, and I'm like, I'm dumping Ripple. Everyone's like, it's going to $5, and I'm like, Bitcoin's not even going up anymore. Nothing's going up anymore.
Yeah.
Gravity. I mean, I don't think people understand
Trend
how
is your
much money had to
friend.
keep coming in to
Hmm.
sustain even just a linear price of a $2 XRP.
Well,
Like daily money just to sustain the price.
and that's my point with proof of work mining is it's like trying to fill a bathtub up when you have the drain open. The water level is going to rise, but you got a lot leaking out the bottom going to pay those power companies. Whereas with Ripple, Yes, one company holds, or at one time held 80% of the supply, and they've been selling that, and they've sold $1.5 billion worth of XRP. But my question to the Bitcoin maximalists who think that's a bad thing is, what have they done with that money? Do you know? And the answer is they've taken and reinvested in developing use cases and developing the ecosystem. Which is a better model? Taking new money that's coming in and sending it out of the network to pay power companies, or taking the new money that's coming in and reinvesting it in developing the ecosystem? That's what Ripple is doing with that money.
Yep. I mean, I see it. I see, Ripple doing a lot. I thought one of the most interesting publicity stunts was with Ellen DeGeneres and
Yep.
Ashton Kutcher. I thought it would have been a more of an earnest publicity stunt if they would have actually transacted XRP. It was just like on the monitor. It would have been like, hey, open your wallet. Here you go. I sent you crypto. But it could have just been a cash transfer if for all we knew, and I just thought that was an interesting one.
No, but that's the whole point of what Ripple's doing is they're bridging fiat. The whole point is not to send crypto; it's to interface with people in the financial system that they're using today.
Yeah, but when those
Because
systems fail because of Bitcoin, what is XRP's role?
wait, why is Bitcoin? Why are these systems going to fail because of Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, it's inevitable that we don't need banks, we don't need middlemen, we don't need
Okay,
central authorities in this ecosystem, right? These are options that people will have to choose to opt into, and when people stop choosing to opt into, using fiat that Ripple is or XRP is empowering, right? Like,
okay, yeah, I see what
what
you're
is the
saying.
role in that world in which there is no more government fiat, there is no dollars, like.
Yeah, so I talk about that as being the long game. First off, I think it's fair to acknowledge Bitcoin was going to come out and replace the banks. That's what everybody was saying in 2012. We're 10 years out. That hasn't happened.
It's
They
getting
haven't.
better. I mean, we still because you are being your
Have
own
you, wait,
bank.
have you given up your fiat
I am
banking
I am
relationships?
I'm completely cashless.
Are you really?
I haven't had a cash thingy in like 2 years, bro. I've only used crypto for everything for over two
But do
years.
you have a bank account?
No, I haven't had a bank account in 2 years.
Wow. Okay, that's impressive.
Yeah, it sucks.
I
It's a
would say
fucking nightmare. I do not recommend it for anybody. Just don't do it.
exactly. And that's the difference. So Ripple is bridging the gap. It's going to, in my view, it's going to transition people from the fiat that they use today gently and slowly into crypto. And that's going to be XRP, that's going to be Bitcoin, that's going to be Ethereum, and
I've
probably
always
a
said
dozen or two
XRP is
others.
Bitcoin's best marketing companion. Like Bitcoin's
Okay.
marketing sucks. But if anybody's going to teach the world about crypto, it's probably going to be XRP. To spend a whole lot of
Yeah.
money talking to the right people about it,
Yeah.
it's a Trojan horse effect. I mean, obviously, if you're going to talk about any coin, first thing people are probably going to do go home and look into Bitcoin and then look into the other thing like XRP. So I've
So
always given XRP that credit where it was due. Is like, they're going to accidentally educate a lot of bankers about Bitcoin and what the main differences are of XRP and BTC.
do you know, are you familiar with ILP, Interledger Protocol, at all?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So the main premise there is, if I want to send something to you and I have Bitcoin and you want, or I have South African Rand and you want Bitcoin Cash deposited in your wallet, ILP will facilitate that. So, uh,
Aren't we? I think I spoke to SLP, Simple Ledger Protocol, a very similar solution.
okay. Interledger Protocol was written by Ripple and then handed off to the W3C. And what Google just announced, that they're going to integrate this into the Chrome browser and Apple Payments, or whatever it is. I think it's Apple Pay. Yeah, is ILP. So this is going to basically create seamless interoperability between the different blockchains, between the fiat currencies of the world. You have connectors that basically kind of function as exchanges, the network protocol figures out, okay, what's the best way to go from my South African Rand that I have to your Bitcoin Cash that you want to accept. And it handles all of those translations, all of those exchanges automatically. Okay. That's the world we're going to live in. And here's the thing, I know exactly what you're saying, and I agree. Fiat is on its way out.
Thank you.
Okay, it is. It's not sound money. They're going to keep printing. They're
Well,
never
they've
going to
announced
stop.
FedNow. That's already been announced. So we know that there's going to be a tokenized Federal Reserve note.
Right, but even that will be inflated. I did a Finastra is a company that's created basically a system for doing CBDCs, and they worked with Ripple, by the way, back in 2014, and they create a sextillion, $10 sextillion. I mean, that's a whole lot of zeros. And then that way they can inflate the money supply at will. And that's not going to change. They're not going to change their behavior just because they transition over to blockchain. And we're going to be in this world where it's going to be seamless to move between fiat and crypto. And eventually Joe Sixpack is going to figure out, hey, when I keep my value in crypto, it holds its value or appreciates. When I keep my money in fiat, it loses purchasing power, daily, weekly, whatever. And as a result, they're going to start keeping their wealth, their value in crypto, and they're only going to move into fiat when they need to pay somebody that's demanding fiat. And ILP is going to facilitate that. Well, once that happens and that reaches critical mass, fiat is going to lose tremendous demand. And with that loss of demand, it's going to start losing tremendous value because nobody's going to want all of this paper that's floating around. And that is going to bring about the end of fiat. And of course, governments can't wage their endless wars without the ability to print money. So they can't, they can't function in any sense of the way that they do today without fiat money and the ability to inflate the supply and, continue spending and living beyond their means. So that's going to bring about, I think, probably a huge backlash as they're, the thrashing around in the tar pit, using the dinosaur analogy. And they're either going to have to really, really change and restructure and look something completely different than they do today, or they're going to cease to exist. So yes, I acknowledge your point and a lot of the Bitcoin maximalist points that siding with Ripple is kind of taking two steps back in some regards as far as KYC AML and some of the other restrictions and so forth. But at the same time, I see it as part of the transition to a world where it is pure crypto, and that brings about massive, massive changes when it comes to fiat and governments that those fiat money systems support.
Yep, and I'll let everybody know, like, it's more of like a religious belief against XRP than like a financial belief. Like I mentioned earlier, like, yeah,
Yep.
I got some XRP, I bought and sold it, and it wasn't, like carrying an upside down crucifix at the time, but it's more of like a political or like a religious reason behind it. Like I don't believe in supporting the banks. I don't want to build the bridge. I don't want
Yes.
them to have any. But if anything, and I've said this before, I feel like I'm tearing down my tribalism filters, and I'm trying to appreciate everything for its contributions to the future of crypto as a whole. And
Mm.
what XRP is doing is actually burning more banker dollars than Bitcoin. So like that is like an amazing feat all on its own. Like XRP is eating fiat, and anything that's helping eat and destroy fiat is fine by me, man. Like. I don't want people to think like, I think XRP won't exist in the future when I say it's a scam. My whole it's a scam thing is it's supporting the banks, and the banks are a scam, and fiat's a scam, and anything working with that, it's so. Yeah, obviously the US dollar is a scam, but it isn't, because you can go get eggs, bread, and milk with it. Similar
Mhm.
to when I say XRP is a scam, it isn't because it does what it does. It's just religiously it's a scam. You know what I mean?
Okay, absolutely. And I had that same internal struggle, and that's where I mentioned the Lambos Hookers and Blow group on Facebook, and Virgil that brought me into that. We exchanged some messages and so forth, and kind of what he sort of opened my eyes to is, this thing is happening whether you or I want it to or not. There's nothing we can say or do that's going to derail the global financial system
Facts.
going with this model. And you may disagree with that, and that's okay. um, However, I think the average investor has the chance to get rich with the banks. And then after that's done, and I don't like that. I don't like
Yeah,
helping
even the
them.
playing fields. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, all the things you said, I agree with 100%. I don't like these bankers. I don't, like I did a video where I talked about Ripple is here. They don't care about the little guy. They're here to lick the boots of the state and bow down to authority and get mainstream adoption. That's their goal at the end of the day. But I'll be happy to get rich in the process. And look at me versus the principled anarchist. I'm going to have the resources to be able to do something to create an alternative that obsoletes some aspect of the state. The anarchist will still have his principles, but no money to do anything about it. So that's kind of how I rationalize it in my own mind. Is I think we're better off having the resources after this thing comes about to be able to create alternatives and to be able to do something to change things than we are to stand on our soapbox on the corner and say this is bad, Ripple bad.
You're right. You're right. And I will say, coming from a former renounced Bitcoin maximalist, now crypto maximalist, that I do consider XRP more of a friend of Bitcoin than an enemy, considering that it's an on ramp into crypto from fiat.
Yep.
And that's the role that it is here to play. And I just the early on misleading marketing of Ripple and XRP, and basically feeling like you had stock in Ripple Labs when you bought an XRP token, and they had to separate the name at one point. It was Ripple, and they had to separate the name because of
Yeah. Yeah.
very sketchy market manipulating marketing technique. But like, that's where a lot of like the bad energy comes from, when it comes from like
Mhm.
people like me that have been around a while, that's seen sort of. And that's why I've had a bad taste in my mouth about Bitcoin Cash, was the very scammy or marketing techniques that they had, and that didn't appeal to me. And I've had to grow past the way things made me feel to observe them without that bias filter in front of me. And I'm
Yeah.
doing more so with XRP, and I've seen people mention Bitcoin Ben in the chat a lot, and then he's opened his eyes to XRP, and we've talked a bit, and actually was going to see if you've ever done a podcast with him, or if you
I
would.
did.
All right, I got to tune into that for sure.
It's on his channel. You can find it.
Oh, I will. That's
He
exactly what I'll be watching after this.
It's frustrating because like we have this conversation and I think he heard my points, he understood my points, and then he went right back to his rhetoric as if that hadn't been explained. So I'm pretty frustrated with Ben at this point.
I don't know if this is like everybody, and I don't think to say this about Ben at all. It's just in general, when it comes to being a content creator, anybody
But
that feels like they're a public persona has to stick to a character that is being
yeah.
projected to them by the people observing. Like, the object is affected by the observation, and when
Hmm.
so many people are looking at you with a projection of you, you can't fight that shit. Like, you can't say this or you can't do that. And I'm like, I can do whatever the hell I want. But a lot
Yeah.
of content creators, I think, have a hard time being open to evolving their opinions, changing their personalities. Like, I wake up one day, I love Fruity Pebbles. I hate it the next day. I just want some Cheerios. Like, and I feel like my personality switches in a public way every day as much as it should. Some people
Yeah.
try to stick to a character that just never evolves, like fucking
I think
Family Guy. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think Pomp is the perfect example of that. I
It
mean, there's
happens. People get stuck in these
man,
characters,
yeah.
and they don't
Plus,
evolve.
like I learned from permaculture, when you scrape a field and you've got bare dirt, the first thing that comes up are the weeds. They're fast growing. They're there to kind of transform the landscape. They're spiky and prickly, and that's kind of what we are. We're not the easiest to get along with. We have our opinions, and uh, getting us together is like herding cats, but we're a necessary kind of force to transform the landscape and bring more people on board to mainstream adoption.
Yeah, that's why I appreciate, these conversations. I really appreciate you coming on because I am completely open minded. I learned a hell of a lot. I mean,
Good,
I
good.
learned so much, and yeah, I try to stay open minded, change my opinions as the information that is given to me changes. The more I know, the more my opinion grows, and if I don't learn anything, I'll obviously stay the same. But I'm constantly doing podcasts. I'm constantly learning, and that's, it changes my opinion over time. I mean, look, I went from being a Bitcoin maximalist to haven't even really used BTC in a while. Like,
Hmm.
legitimately, I've given it away, I've played with it, but when I'm spending crypto, I've been spending Bitcoin Cash, and that's just
That's good.
my own personal choice. And everyone's going to have a choice at some point. I mean, you could use Potcoin because you think it's funny, you could use Dogecoin again for the meme, or you could use Dash because you like the color blue. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's the alternatives that you can choose to use. And then there's the projects, like what Ripple's doing by stepping up and, working with the corporations, trying to ease the transition so it's not so chaotic. And
Yep.
like you said, the long game is eventually that, fiats will die, and
Yes.
hopefully Ripple helps bring that to an end, man. And we're left with the crypto ecosystem. But
We're left with sound
it's
money
a
and
long ride,
governments.
man. And it's gonna suck if
Yeah.
we don't have these ramps to kind of hold our hands across the bridges. That's
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. I agree. I think it was a good conversation, Ken. I
Thanks, Sam.
appreciate it.
Hey,
Have to have you
and
on
and for
my
all the
channel at some
XRP
point.
maximalists, if you're watching, if you're an XRP maximalist, you see that link down there? It says oneupcoin.com/donate/Ken Bozak. Yeah, you can send XRP to that, and it will pop up on the screen and do all kinds of random colors. And Sam, you should add that to your YouTube because
Okay.
the Ripple community actually turned me on to this because it's the fastest one or whatever. So like, if you want to get a donation on YouTube instead of sending a YouTube super chat, they
Hmm.
could send XRP to your oneupcoin.com link. And
Okay.
on your screen, you'll actually get like an alert that you received XRP with like a message they given you. And
Okay.
it's one of the more instant options.
Um,
Like if you use
Ken, what
Bitcoin, it would take forever.
are you familiar with Coil?
Yeah, I've heard of Coil.
Okay, you ought to go set up an account with Coil, link your YouTube account to it, and then the Coil subscribers that are watching this will be streaming you micropayments of XRP.
Oh, cool, cool, cool. All right,
So
so
like my last video was 50 minutes or something, and I mean I think 20,000 people watched it. I don't know how many of those
so
were
you're
Coil
you're like
subscribers.
mining XRP though, like from basically producing content.
Well, so the Coil subscribers, I am one. You pay $5 a month to Coil, and then I have a plugin for my browser. So any of the other content creators that have set up that link, when I'm watching
Interesting.
their content, it's streaming XRP to them.
Sort of like
And
the basic attention token version of BAT,
yes,
but for XRP.
yeah, and I get BAT too as well. So
Cool. Dude, I'm on so many platforms, man. I'm on
yeah,
Twitch and they use BSV and people are like, "Are you promoting BSV?" And I'm like, "No, I'm promoting things that work." Like I got a lot of shit for using the XRP tip bot before. I think it's like got shut down or something like
it's
Twitter.
back
Oh, it's
with a
back?
hashtag now.
Awesome. But I use the XRP tip bot a lot. I don't know if that's like a public ledger that people can see, but I've sent and received so much XRP because it worked. But I got a
Yeah,
lot of shit because they're like, "Oh, I thought you hate XRP. Why are you using this?" And I'm like, "Well, can you tip somebody in BTC with Twitter? Because I would
exactly.
fucking do that, but I can't. So I
At
use
the end of the
XRP."
day, it's utility that
Yes, it
matters.
is
It's
exactly.
utility. And Bitcoin is sorely lacking.
It is
And
though. It sucks,
Bitcoin
man.
Cash
I'll agree. It sucks.
and Ethereum and XRP, they have way more utility than Bitcoin ever will.
Yeah, that's the
So
truth, man. Eventually, hopefully, we see something. I mean, I personally believe, I want to believe that we'll see that with Bitcoin, but I think it's decentralization is as much of a benefit as it is a detriment, and we're gonna see how that plays out. It is so truly decentralized that it could just fucking ruin it or make it. So we're just gonna
yeah,
play it out.
it's very telling to me that all of a sudden we have Litecoin wanting to take a cut of the mining fees. You have Bitcoin Cash and it's like, and what's it for? To fund developers. What did Ripple do with that 1.5 billion in XRP sales? They funded development teams both for the XRP ledger and for the ILP. I mean,
Right.
they've got 20, 30 developers working on ILP to build the toolkits to allow, everyday businesses to easily integrate the Interledger protocol into their processes.
So
That's the difference.
So to wrap things up here, I would
Mhm.
like to see if we could come to an accord that maybe XRP will not replace Bitcoin, but so much as a sense of will work so closely beside it, it may be more of the USD to BTC pairing replacement of BTC to XRP pairing.
I would say so. By replace, in my mind that means trading volume. I think, and maybe replace is not the best word to use. I think XRP is going to eclipse BTC in volume, and it's already happened on the Australian exchange because Flash FX is doing ODL. It's already happened on Bitso. It's been that way for 2 months now. XRP's trading volume.
How long till the market cap flipping?
So the market cap,
Give me the John
man,
McAfee Dickey
I have no
prediction.
idea. I have no idea. I mean, I think it's baked in the cake, or it's in the cards at this point that it's going to happen. I don't know when that will be.
Is there anything that you're looking forward to that you could see as a catalyst for a new all-time high potentially? Like, is there anything that you're looking as more of like that fuel to the gas tank that XRP has needed to see a new all-time high? Because I feel like a lot of markets have been recovering and
Yeah,
consistently. When you look at the percentage that XRP has seen in a decline during the bear market, it hasn't really recovered as much as its
as much. Yeah.
competitors.
So this gets a little deep, but within Bitso, somebody has to be on the other side of that transaction when MoneyGram is sending XRP and selling it for fiat. Somebody has to be there to buy that fiat, and those are the market makers. Right now, I don't know a whole lot about who they are and what they're doing, but I think when we have like 2 or 3 market makers in a given market competing to buy that XRP, that's going to be a significant milestone. And I don't even know that there's not going to be a CoinDesk article about that or anything. But what I see happening is a very rapid expansion and rollout of on-demand liquidity. There's a liquidity bot on Twitter that shows the growth, and I mean it's exponential. It is going crazy, and I think that's going to continue. And as they add new corridors, the network effect is going to continue to blow that up more and more. And I think it's going to be a big year for ODL and eventually for XRP.
Well, I do wish XRP as much success as possible because I am tired of the toxicity of
Yeah,
fucking bringing torches to everybody else's campfire.
yeah,
Putting things down just to put yourselves up. I think we need to get away from it. So
agree.
I appreciate you teaching me as much as you have about XRP, honestly, and maybe people have learned enough to maybe get away from the tribalism ideologies that in order for Bitcoin to succeed, XRP needs to fail. I think that's
Yeah.
a common misnomer in the community through like a maximalist propaganda, but honestly, anything on Coin Market Cap, all of it needs to succeed for us to succeed. If
Yeah.
Bitcoin were to have a detrimental failure today, that would hurt XRP in a very
Oh
public
yeah.
way
Yeah.
because of that failure. So we all need to learn that the rising tide will raise all ships, and
Hmm. And
yeah,
its utility at the end of the day.
yeah.
There's
If
going
it
to be
works, it
there's
works,
not going
and
to be one
I'm gonna
coin to
use it.
rule them all. Period. It's going to be at least a half dozen to a dozen that have real world utility, that are solving a real problem, that are going to be very successful
Dude,
at the
that's
end
a
of the day.
whole nother podcast. Get the fuck out of here with the stellar comments, you fucks. No, I'm not doing it. We talked. You want to do a stellar podcast thing, then you get him and you do it, all right? Because this
I have no
was
idea what that is.
stellar. Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody, stellar's like, XRP competitor, X blah, blah, blah. And
Ah,
I
okay.
had a really interesting conversation with the both, actually, a consensus in the Ripple room, and then I got thrown out because I'm a jackass. It's nobody else's
Yeah.
fault. All right, man. I'm gonna let you go, Sam. I really appreciate you, and yeah, I'll definitely be checking out your YouTube channel. It's Get to the Lifeboat.
Yeah, to the
To
lifeboats,
the
and
lifeboats.
go monetize your YouTube channel on Coil. You already have a TipBot account. All you do is register with Coil. There will be a lot of XRP fans watching this, and many of them are going to be Coil subscribers, and you'll get some payment streamed to you.
Is that coil.io? COIL?
Coil.com.
Oh, coil.com. How legit
Yep.
is that? All right, Sam. Everybody, thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and yeah, this has been awesome. The conversation's now in your hands, guys. The chats are always open. I'll see you down there in the comment section below. As always, have a day.
Thank you.
Shout out to the sponsors of the podcast, MonarchToken.io, the complete crypto solution. Monarch Wallet is now available for Android, iOS, and desktop devices today. Do you want to learn how to mine crypto? Well, all you have to do is visit cryptomining.tools for profitable crypto mining information today. The Divi Project, that is diviproject.org, your one-click solution for staking and masternodes. Earn cryptocurrency using social media platforms like SOME.social, SOMEE.social, New Era Social Media. Get paid to write reviews, like reviews, comment on reviews. Visit bravocoin.com and get paid to review. Available for Android and iOS devices. bravocoin.com. CoinFlip, the world's best Bitcoin ATM. Better service, better fees. Better visit coinflip.tech today. Shout out to